Mm. Short answer is not much. All right, so let's get into this one. No, backpedal. That's not working. I need to clean some things off. Okay, so I did find some of the things we were talking about last time, but I still haven't found the original copy of my Crow fan fiction. Which sucks, because I want to play with that a little bit more. But documents, old works. I've got a pretty substantial pile up there of some of those. And we were talking about that last time, about certain things that I'm fondly remembering. Some of them I had completely forgotten. So, looking at the list of the ones that we had, wish I could get the preview to work for some document file styles. I had been trying to find one of these things that I worked on before. And there was one I'd forgotten about. Well, I hadn't forgotten about, but I had set aside years ago and sort of brainstormed up the story sequence that I wanted to go with, but sort of let it go and forgot that I had written out whole first chapters of it. And it was one that I had been thinking about doing as a web comic, where I could make little posable, almost like stop motion puppets that I could pose and then take still photographs of, and then make those the panels of the comic book. But I'd forgotten I'd written out the first chunks of it. And then I'd sort of forgotten about a couple of them, like Iron Marked and Shadowcast. I remember I had done them, and I wrote them as short stories. And that was from a short story every day for a month project that I did years ago. So Iron Marked was a story that I kind of thought was an interesting look at what happens to changelings down the timeline. So in mythology, there's the concept of changelings, which are human children taken by the Fae, who are they leave behind a Fae being of some kind, or a hollow log made to look like a baby. And there's sort of myths about how to get your child back. The question would be, like, what if they never got their child back? What happens to those children if they age and come into their adulthood in the Fae realm? Human children brought to their adulthood in the Fae realm. And so I had the story sort of set up as sort of an escaped human who had been raised among the Fae, and they're encountering an outcast Fae member who's been living amongst the humans. And they're sort of kind of like meeting and coming to understand that neither of them can ever really go back to the way they were supposed to be. And so they're going to have to work together to become something other than what they were. And then Shadowcast was one I did where I was doing an experiment with discussing sort of a magic system based off of shadow puppets. Illusion and shadow puppets. Knickerbocker Size 12 was a steampunk story I'd been working on. I also found Mazes, Volume 1. These are, in fact, scans I made of one year I did a project starting on New Year's every day for a year. Sometimes if I missed a day, I'd do 2 the next day. But every day for a year, I did one hand-drawn maze, about half the size of a 8 by 12, 8 by 11 piece of printer paper. So I'd make a maze every day for a year. So I had 365 mazes made. Actually, a little bit more than that. And I think I did like 5 or 6 styles. And I made them all up myself. So they're all from scratch. And I found I'd compiled them all into one book, essentially. And that was back in the day when you could try to print. There was a web service where you could list up your PDF files as a downloadable book. And I tried that, and I think I sold a copy or 2, and I never got the money from it because the company went out of business before it did anything. But I'd be curious to see if I could get that file cleaned up. Ooh, it is a mess. That is not how we want that to look. Okay. Okay, so some of them are still good. I think my cover just became a mess. I wonder if wow, I forgot about that style. I wonder if I just took these, so maybe clean them up a little bit in like Photoshop. And then just publish them online or something. Do like a Kindle book or maybe a... Wow, that's a tight one. Some of these are not as bad as I remember them. Like I did one style that was basically I filled a square or a rectangle with little varying sized bubble circles. And then I just erased a path through those bubble circles. And those are some of the most obvious versions of these. Some of them I did were very rectangular. Some of them were very sort of Art Deco style. What? That one's pretty clear. I could follow that one super easy. What I need to do is make some confounding patterns. But yeah, so 365 of those. I do like some of the very deco-y kind of ones. And the brain style. That's my classic go-to maze style. I think I've showed some of those before. So it's 60 pages. I think was the first volume that I put out as a single volume book. 60. So I must have been planning to do this as I think a 3-volume set that I was eventually going to work towards, but it is what it is. That one could be fun just to retake those and play with them again. I might redo or redesign from the ground up some mazes based off of those. I found one that I forgot. I had forgot I'd ever started was Mercurial Realm. It was supposed to be I knew I had come up with an idea. I forgot that I had started writing it. Martin McMasters was the main character, and they were supposed to be exploring and mapping the interior of a weird asteroid structure. And they found these sort of borehole style tunnels that ran through the length of the structure. So he was pouring down a conductive material that would set up within those channels, and then going to run a sort of a energy signature through that the rebound of would help map the interior of that channel. But it was based off of the idea that this is the skeleton of a space creature that is able to travel through subspace. So it could travel faster than light by activating some kind of nervous system mechanism that would launch it into subspace. And if you find this skeleton and you fill that mechanism that lets it travel through subspace with a conductive material and then send a signal through it, he's activating a sort of faster than light drive. But not without a destination, he's going to just crash into subspace. And so it sort of becomes like getting lost in the Bermuda Triangle. And that was sort of what I was building with that one. That was the idea. I forgot that I wrote the first prologue, I guess, or intro chapter. Portal City. I wrote a Rumpelstiltskin rewrite with modern mindset changes. And so that was a little weird. Songs of the Deep was another one that I wrote. And so Songs of the Deep was built around the idea of simply, if you took the idea of flipping something upside down to get a different perspective on it, this one was based off of the idea of an underwater civilization like mermen or Atlantis or whatever you want to frame it as. But a civilization of underwater fish people or whatever, and their perspective is flipped. So they live upside down underwater. And when you swim through the 3-dimensional waters, the day you die, you float to the surface in our perspective. But to them, you sink to the bottom. But the other thing is, we're used to framing things in the sense of, if I give you a cup, a snack cup like this, and if we put something into it, it'll fall to the bottom of it and weigh it down from there. So if I let this go, it'll drop based off of the thing weighing it down. Now what I was doing was, in the underwater realm, the equivalent of this is being underwater, and an air bubble would force it down to their perspective, to the surface, to ours. Whereas not having that air bubble in it, you could potentially let something float away. And it floats down to us, up to them. And so it's just sort of playing on that difference of perspective. And could I tell a story where that one was the point of the story? But I did find the ones that were based off of the manga. There was the Worlds Collide, which was when the planetary body known as Orpheus struck Proto-Earth and is what caused the formation of the moon. Lumi, Gloomy, and Yumi, Dark Artifacts, and I did finally find the file for the other one. That one was called, I guess I called it Alien Guise, Guise. And that one was based off of writing a manga that's based off of aliens coming to Earth in the history of the world and finding Earth pop culture and not knowing it's fiction, and then building something based off of that fiction, and then sort of falling. So it's sort of like Stargate SG-1 if the aliens came to Earth and they were like Galaxy Quest, in which in Galaxy Quest you have the aliens who watch Earth television signals and assume they're historical documents about real people going through certain experiences. So you have the Stargate opens up. Aliens come to historical Earth at different periods and encounter some of the fiction. Lord of the Rings, those types of things. But more than any others, they find a Japanese manga called Ranma 1/2. And in Ranma 1/2, it's a real thing. They have these comics about this teenage boy who's training to be a martial artist. And his father takes him on this martial arts exploration journey across China. And they come to this series of hot springs. And these hot springs are cursed. Whoever falls into these... long ago in ancient past times, for whatever reason, all sorts of random creatures and people fell into these hot springs and drowned and died. And then when they drowned and died in these springs, they cursed the waters so that anybody who fell into them afterwards, when they're doused with cold water, takes the form of the being who drowned in that spring. So there's a spring of drowned piglet. And so anybody who falls into that spring, when they're splashed with cold water, they turn into a piglet. And when they're splashed with hot water, they turn back into their human form. And Ranma 1/2, when he's on his journey with his father, they're fighting on bamboo poles, and he knocks his father into one spring of drowned panda. So his father turns into a panda whenever he's doused with cold water. Ranma turns into a young girl, because when his father pops out, hits him into another spring, he falls into the spring of drowned girl. So every time he gets wet with cold water, he turns into a young woman. And the whole comic is just a sort of a comedic play with that sort of mentality having happened in the past. He's trying to go to school, and he's living in Japan, and his father and another guy his father trained with have made arrangements that their children will marry when they get older. And so, it's a weird comic. But now imagine the aliens from Galaxy Quest found that comic instead of the Galaxy Quest TV series that they based their technology and culture around. So you have these aliens that used a Stargate, traveled to Earth, discovered this comic, went back to their home planet, and built technology and pieces of their civilization around Ranma 1/2 style stories. Now, I will probably change some of those components a little bit, but the way I wrote it was this alien civilization built a warehouse full of drowned springs in which, if you fall into them, they will change you in such a way that you take on the form of another being. And they did it in such a way that it's sort of similar to an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where the characters assume the physicality of a world they're visiting, so that these people who don't know about alien civilizations don't suspect that they are not part of their population. And so you have these aliens who built these springs based off of Ranma 1/2 that can turn them into beings on other planets, and then they go visit and populate the other planets. Well, the story is you have 3 kids on a field trip that accidentally has an earthquake, and they fall into a cave-in and find the gate that brings them to this alien world. And once they're in the alien world, they fall into these springs and change their shape to various aliens. And so that was sort of just the goofy fun that I was having with that one. That one might be fun to play with a little bit. I do think the dark artifact approach was, I think, one of the better, like Lumi, Gloomy, and Yumi and Dark Artifact were 2 of the best. Well, and Worlds Collide. I had the whole first volume of Worlds Collide built out. There's a lot of this stuff that I feel like I could revisit. And I feel the urge now more than I have in a while to get back to working on those projects. And that sort of feels like a crime to me. So I've got what I've been working on thus far this month for National Novel Writing Month. The answer to the title of the video is I got a lot of pieces. So the things that I was working on specifically for this month, I've got some outline pieces and some scenes, but not a streamlined story that's telling itself. And I know we're only we're about 2/3 of the way through, aren't we? Yeah. We're sort of at that point where you're in the middle of the weeds and you're feeling like, this is terrible. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This is turning out to be garbage, and you're likely to give up. I'm not giving up, but I'm acutely aware of the fact that I am not where I need to be, and I'm not doing nearly as well as I would hope. And part of that is, I don't know how I did this the first few times I did this, where I was working, I think I was working 4 days a week, 6 to 8 hours a day, and then doing writing every day. I don't know how I did that. Because right now, I'll tell you right now, working retail as we work our way into the holiday season, I am not in the headspace to do any creative writing when I get back out of it. And it feels like I wake up and I've got just very little time to get ready before I have to go into work. I go into work, I come out, and I just I'm not in the headspace to do it. So I try to do a little work on a few other things to work my way into getting into the headspace. And then I haven't done any writing by the time I have to go to bed and get ready to do it again the next day. And it sucks because I'm doing work pretty much every day of the week. So it's every day of the week I'm not in the headspace to do what I need to do for my writing. How I did this years ago, I just don't know how I did that. But it's not impossible. We've got 10 days left, 11 days. No, 10 days. And I've written a 50,000 word novel in 3 days before. So it's not impossible, but the more I tell myself, well, I'll have a little chance to do this, the more I'm pushing that stuff aside and saying, like, it's not urgent yet until it's too late. So Sunday, Tuesday, Sunday. So theoretically, I will have 3 days that are not work days in the last bit of this month. And I will have hours each day that I'm not working available. So if I set those times like a commitment, whether or not I feel like it or not, just to sit my butt down and write. It doesn't matter what I'm writing, just cram write. I should be able to get what I need done. We'll see how that goes. Yeah. So looking at what I want to get to doing this coming year is really what I keep landing on. So starting to plan out what December. I mean, I've got a December of Vlogsmas that I'm going to end up doing, I guess. But what does January through December next 2021 look like for me? And I'm getting myself amped up. I'm getting myself excited to do stuff again. Like I did last year, not 2020. 2020 was a mess. We landed in 2020 without a plan, and it showed for the first 4 months, and then the pandemic hit while I was planless. So that did not go well. My goal is to not have that happen for 2021. So I guess part of that is sort of reworking some of my plans for my reactions, and I will shave this off on New Year's Eve. This is coming off, the beard of discontent, the 2020 beard. I thought about shaving my head too, but I've never been happy with that. When I was much younger, I had very short hair. Not my style. Doesn't suit me. Frankly, I don't like being fully clean shaven either, because that just looks weird to me. But if I can get myself into the pattern of the writing process for the end of this month, I think what I want to try to do is get my 2 things done this month. And next month, kind of continue the process of just seeing if I can do a little more rewriting or writing exercises for December while I do my vlog, and set up what we're going to do when we hit January, which was animation month, I believe, for the monthly projects. And then February would be the alphabet month. So we've got those list of monthly challenges to do. I'm game for doing those. But I also want to keep going in the background with doing some of the writing. Because like I said, I've got all of these projects. I've got the 4 manga style stories that I might want to see if I can build out in that RPG Maker, Manga Maker software. And then I could see if I could rebuild the hand-drawn mazes and rewrite some of my other fiction, like the Might be fun to redo that short story, The Sim, where it's talking to the reader as if telling them, wake up, you're an NPC and it's time to move about in the world again. I could do a podcast, work on my podcasts as well. But I could do a podcast episode where I do a radio play version of No Man's Land, which was the one about the aliens came to Earth in the 50s. And certain members of the human population were trying to figure out a way to find another intelligent species on Earth to invalidate the trade agreements. And then I could definitely do some rewrites of some of my previous NaNoWriMo writings and publish some of those through Kindle. And then there were some of the other ideas that I had outlined and never gotten around to writing that I intend to get to at some point. I have a Cyberpunk Trilogy. I actually have two Cyberpunk trilogies. I have Cast in Stone. Some short story collections, one based off of automating, well, actually, I think it's probably two short stories for that one. I was writing a pair of stories that was automation of our world, and it's negative, like a story that tells it from a negative perspective, and then a story that tells it from a positive point of view. And then they were sort of automation, augmentation, were the two phrases. And then I had, come on, where were they? I have a huge list of things to work on. I have the Medusa story that was used for inspiring my RPG game setting. The Satyrs and Cyclops. It was basically my look at Satyrs and Cyclops is my approach to looking at so much of fantasy has elves and dwarves, and it's based off of a very Tolkien style fiction. And I wanted to break that pattern. I wanted to write a Lord of the Rings that wasn't Lord of the Rings. So instead of having elves and dwarves, I said, what you're really looking at in that type of setting is elves are the verdant, the green forests, the trees, the wild game, and the fruits, nuts, berries, just kind of very wild population. And the dwarves were the very industrial, technological to a degree population. The tool users, the metals, stone, that sort of mindset. And what I ended up looking through was, okay, so what would be something that you could have those qualities? So instead of elves, I was looking at the idea of the satyrs, the fauns, the goat-legged people of Greek mythology that frolicked in the forests. And then what would be the technological, industrial equivalent? And so for this, in Greek mythology, there were two types of cyclops. The cyclops that were the one-eyed children of Poseidon, giant sheep herders on an island that are the sort of antagonists on one of the adventures of the Odyssey, I think it was. Or was it the Iliad? At any rate, they're sort of dumb giants with one eye. But the other population of Cyclops for Greek mythology were three brothers, and they were sort of like the Titans in that they were related to the Titans and the Olympian gods as sort of uncles and cousins, but not part of either population. And those three ended up being assistants to the god Hephaestus in his forge. It seemed like a good fit. So if I said, we take a population of those, their children, their sons and daughters or whatever, and you mix them with the Pan god and his sons and daughters of the fauns and satyrs, and you treat those much in the same way as you treat the dwarves and the elves in mythology, and you build a setting in which their worldviews are sort of at odds, and then you build a story for them to work on. So really, like, when I break down all of the potential stories I could be writing, those are some of my big ones, is the Satyrs and Cyclops, the Medusa setting, and the Cast in Stone story. I do have a couple others that sort of could be in the background of any of those settings. But those are like the three biggies that I would love to be able to just do. Now we have that other master setting that I built last year, I think it was, when we were looking at fiction writing, where I was doing the cobbling together a master universe of all of my fantasy settings. And that's really an environment in which to tell a bunch of short stories. So I have a lot of play space for story writing. So I have my cyberpunk stories, my fantasy stories, and if I did just one of each per month, I've got more than enough for each month of the year coming. So if I can get myself into a pattern of doing some writing, maybe not every day, but at least often enough in the month that I can get some of that writing done while also working on like the podcast. It's a lot of extra work, but I'm hoping I get to a point in the coming year, in the coming month or two, where I can sort of leave behind my day jobs and for a little while at least work on some of my creative projects so that my time is mine. Like, I wake up on the start of the day, I put some work into the things I want to do and that I can create and share. And then that's what I do during the day. That's my goal. But right now, I'm going to have to see what my schedule over the next few days is. So my next day on for video would be Sunday. And Sunday, Tuesday, and then the following Sunday would be my days off in the next 10 days. And if I can set all three of those days to just be writing and nothing else, I may be able to get to a point where I can celebrate pulling off another National Novel Writing Month. If I'm super ambitious, I can do writing every day for the rest of the month and get potentially 2 stories done. I don't know if I'd get to 100,000. I might be able to get to 100,000. I won't hold my breath on that, though. If I can get past 50,000, that's all I need. But and then moving into December, just keep that momentum going and do some writing, and then from there, do the daily vlogs every day in December, and then be ready for January to do animation and podcasts and continue the momentum in writing. I feel like I could do it. Like, I know I could do it because I've done it before. But I need that first victory to really get me off the ground. Because that's the thing I discovered the first year I did this. The first year I did National Novel Writing Month, I was utterly and totally convinced it was insane. But I'd give it a try. I sat down, and I was doing fairly well, but not well enough to finish on time. And so within 9 days of the end of the month, I said, let's start another one. And that new story that I started, I finished at 50,000 words on the last day. And that moment of going like, oh my God, what did I just do? I achieved something I wasn't even sure was possible. And I did it in 9 days, not 30 days. What does that mean if I just apply myself to these other goals that I had? So I started doing those things, and I made massive progress on a lot of those projects. And I feel like that moment of victory after the first National Novel Writing Month was that thing that set me off on that, like, oh, I could totally do so much more if I just applied myself, and gave me permission, gave me the sense that I could do that. So I'm looking to hit that goal again and wake myself back into doing things like I used to. Of course, I am older now, and it is 2020. So who knows? But in the meantime, I will catch you on Sunday. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. It's almost 45 minutes in, so I'm going to call it a night here. I know this was a stupid ramble with not a lot of focus tonight, but it's sort of what happens when you get brain fried between work and trying to get yourself to pump out a novel in a short period of time. There's a little bit of a burnoutiness to it. But I will catch you on Sunday night. Until then, I want you to take care of yourself. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And I will hope you have a wonderful night. We haven't done anything to cause any weird dreams lately, right? Maybe that's what I need to do. I need to inspire some twisted, weird dreams in everybody. I need to maybe fix this up a little bit. Because I think I could use this for some of my projects in the coming year. We'll see. I'm brainstorming a little bit, but I do a lot of brainstorming. Let's figure out what we can actually do.